Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today is a Tunisian crochet designer, Lori Harrison. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you for having me.
So I discovered Tunisian crochet for myself relatively recently, like probably just when I was starting my YouTube channel a couple of years ago. I ran into the account of Padma R, and she since then became a Vogue knitting instructor on Tunisian crochet, and she creates wonderful creations, but I've never seen it before finding her
Mhm.
account. How would you describe what Tunisian crochet for people who don't know? How is it different from crochet?
So it's actually very different than crochet. I actually think it's a little closer to knitting in some ways. We it uses a different type of hook than regular crochet. It usually it holds a lot of you can hold a bunch of stitches all at once. So it's in some ways it's like knitting where you're working a whole bunch of stitches at the same on the row. You don't just do one at a time. And it is a little different than both of them. It has what we call two passes, a forward pass and a return pass, where you basically are casting on a bunch of stitches and then you are taking all those stitches off your hook on the return pass. And so it's kind of interesting in some ways. We don't ever turn our work the same way you do in knitting and crochet. So it's kind of like its own craft, but it does use a hook. So it's in some ways similar to crochet in that, if you make a mistake, you have to pull everything out back to where it was. You can't just, you know, ladder down and fix something the way you can in knitting. But it also means that, if stuff comes off your hook, you're not like frantically trying to keep things from unraveling too. So
Right. Well, tell me your journey with Tunisian crochet. How did you discover it?
that's an interesting question. So yeah, I had never heard of Tunisian crochet until probably 6, 7 years ago. And the way I came across it was I was visiting my local yarn store looking for yarn for a project, and they happened to be showing a Tunisian crochet scarf sample to one of the other customers, and I was like, "Ooh, I've never seen this fabric before. What on earth is it?" And they're like, "Tunisian crochet," and I'm like, "What?" Because like I've crocheted since I was a little girl. My mom taught me when I was like 8, 9, something like that, and so I was just enamored with the fabric I was seeing. I asked them, um, what do I need to do this? They said a Tunisian crochet hook. And this is actually the hook that I went home from the store with that day. And because I was like, oh, well, if I'm using this yarn, what hook do I need? And I went home. I looked up, you know, YouTube videos, found out how to do the Tunisian simple stitch, was making something very, very basic. I loved it. I then, went to my library, got some books on Tunisian crochet, and it just took off from there. So that's how I found Tunisian crochet.
Well, when you already know how to crochet, does it make it easier to learn Tunisian crochet, or is it like more confusing because it's that mixture of sort of crocheting and knitting techniques?
I'm not honestly sure if it's any harder. It's a new craft. So but you're doing stuff differently, but I wasn't like a super, super crocheter when I came across Tunisian crochet. It was interesting. I did it, but I wasn't like hardcore into crochet. It wasn't until I had found Tunisian crochet and just all these wonderful textures that I really got obsessed with fiber arts. So,
So are you
um,
like
I,
really, really hardcore Tunisian crocheter now, you'd say?
exactly. And I honestly, if you're a knitter, I think it actually is easier to go from knitting to Tunisian crochet than knitting to crochet. Um, I know crocheters that love Tunisian crochet. I know some crocheters don't like it, but I don't think it's all that terribly hard. It takes a little, I mean, it's a new skill, right? So anytime you're learning a new skill, it takes a little effort, but I think most people, once they actually get the hang of it, just fall so much in love with it, Tunisian crocheters are diehard Tunisian crocheters.
Well, the reason I invited you to my channel is to talk about this book that's
Yes.
out today, actually, right? So this is Exploring Tunisian Crochet. It's a book by Stackpole Books. And by the way, guys, stay tuned for that because I have them on my channel as well. And Lori and I talked about it, and she said she would be very interesting to know all the insider information from the book publishers and to see how they pick those books. How do you go from just learning Tunisian crochet, looking at couple YouTube videos and going to see couple books in the library, to coming up with the idea that you need to put out your own book on Tunisian crochet?
That's a great question. So when I was beginning, this was 2016-ish. There wasn't actually a lot out there. Tunisian crochet, the patterns on Ravelry were, there was a very limited amount. There was only a few books out there. They just kind of went over the basics. I eventually ended up buying like everything I could find on the subject and just absorbing it all. And I did all the patterns on Ravelry that I thought were interesting, and I was like, but I want to do more. Like, so that's how I got into designing. I started going, well, there's so much more I think we can do with this. We're just barely scratching the surface. So I started doing a lot of fun, coming up with ideas, figuring out how to do different shaping, different, ways of combining stitches, and I just loved it. But I had to like do it all myself. I had to go find things and then, just develop some of these new methods on how to do stuff all on my own. And I don't think everybody should have to go through that, which is why, like, I have some stuff on my website, but like most people, if you're trying to do anything beyond the basics in Tunisian crochet, you just kind of have to like search for it. It's in bits and pieces all over the place. And that's where the idea for this book came in. It was, I wanted to have everything in one place so that once you get beyond the basics, because there's books on the basics, Tony Lipsy has a fabulous book that goes over the basics, and I recommend that too. But once you want to get beyond that, there isn't a book out there for it. It doesn't, there's nothing covering, more advanced stitches, more advanced techniques, all the different ways to increase and decrease and, work in the round and stuff. I guess at some point I was just like, I want to have the book that I wish I had, 3 months after getting my first hook. So that's why I came up with this book.
Well, you are a full-time engineer.
Yes, I'm a systems engineer. So part of being a systems engineer is you write detailed procedures on how to do things. And so this kind of comes naturally to me. I want to explain how to do things in as clear a way as possible and doing it succinctly and, making it so that people can actually learn easily what they need to do stuff. So, yeah.
When you decided to put this book together, tell me like how you approached it. Like, was that going by what skills you need to learn first, second, third, or how to improve on those skills? Tell me like your logic behind that book.
Yes, that's actually, I wanted to do it so if you had zero knowledge of Tunisian crochet, you could pick up this book and still learn. So it starts off going through, how to pick your first hook, how to start swatching, goes through the 5 basic stitches. Or at least I consider there's 5 basic stitches in Tunisian crochet. There's the simple stitch, the full stitch, the knit stitch, the purl stitch, and the reverse stitch. And beyond that, there's a bunch of more stitches, stitch patterns, but I wanted to make sure that it moved sequentially in difficulty. So you start off at the very basic and you work your way, and after you're done with the chapter on basic stitches, okay, then you can go to the first pattern in the book and start doing an easy first pattern. It's a cowl. It's this cowl, and it's designed to work with just a regular crochet hook because it doesn't have a lot of stitches that are on the hook at the same time.
Okay.
So the book is in easy to advanced difficulty in stitches and techniques. The patterns are also in from easy to advanced techniques, so that, and it's all explained like levels and stuff like that, but it's meant to be so that you aren't accidentally dropped into something that's beyond the skill level of what you currently are. You can gradually learn how to do all the various techniques and stuff.
So when you write the book, and I want to talk about the way this book is written, because there is a lot of step-by-step pictures, not just any pictures. There are some suggestions for right-handed people, left-handed people, really step-by-step. Was that very difficult to come up like with the step-by-step? Because like when you teach something on YouTube or when you're showing something in real life, you skip through, like you fly through it, right? Whereas
Yeah.
the book for a person who never done Tunisian crochet, that must make it more complicated.
Yeah, I guess it probably does. I think that's where my systems engineering background actually helps me, because one of the things we need to do when creating build and test procedures, because I work with scientific cameras, so we have to build them and then we test them. And you need to know what people need to do in order to make sure that things are going to work in the end. So figuring out the appropriate skill level and what level of detail is needed for that skill level. So one of the things you will see in the book is the very first chapter. There's a lot of steps, even for something as simple as just doing your starting chain. When you get further on, it assumes you already know all the stuff in the beginning, so we're going to be only doing a few steps. You get to see the critical ones. I'm assuming you already know how to do a yarn over, so I'm not going to show you how to do a yarn over again and stuff like that. So I think my engineering background really helped me like understand like how much detail I needed to show in what stage of the book.
Was it difficult for you to deal with publishing side of it? Because first of all, there is space issues when you put something in the book, right? And your vision might not necessarily correspond with their vision. And plus, you didn't have experience yet of putting book like this together. So it must have been some mistakes learning along the way. Tell me a little bit about that process.
I will flat out say that I really enjoyed working with Stackpole. They were very responsive when I would send questions to them and stuff like that. I definitely, when I first started, I don't think I had a concrete vision, but by the time I actually started, like when I submitted the proposal, I had an outline and, you know, a description of all the patterns I wanted to do. So, but I mean, this is 5 pages and that has to turn into 160 pages worth of stuff, right? So there's a lot that goes into it. And figuring out exactly what to do, yeah, it was very overwhelming at the beginning. I chunked it up into pieces, figured out what I needed to do in what order. When I would have questions, Stackpole was definitely very good about responding and giving me guidance. They were, they were very helpful, and I'm very glad I had them, because I imagine that's not always the case with different publishers. There's always parts where it's like, you know, I want this thing to be the highlight, and they're like, but this looks better, and that's fine, you know. The cover art on the book was, I was required to give them, I think 4 or 5 different options for the cover. They actually choose none of them and pulled this one from an image that I had submitted for inside the book. But I think they did a good job. They understand it better than I do. So they're publishers. Layout is not something that I had any experience with, and I was very happy to let them take care of it with just like, they would come up with like a sample and give it to me, and I would say, yes, I like this, no, I don't like that, and they would reformat and stuff. So it was a really good experience for me. I was expecting it to be more difficult than it was, and it wasn't, working with them. So
How did you go about picking up what patterns you're going to put into that book?
it was definitely very different than indie publishing, because indie publishing, I can just go with whatever idea I want, and include whatever stitches I want and whatever techniques I want. And, you know, I'll write down what they are and you can choose whether or not you want to do it. But with a book, they all have to, it's a collection. It's a collection of 20 patterns and they have to have some sort of flow between them and a cohesiveness. So like even just picking the yarn, it's like you can see that there's a color palette because I wanted everything to nicely flow together. There's a lot of purples and blues and grays and some greens and stuff like that. There's a few other colors that thrown in, but it's meant to be a cohesive group. Doing the patterns, it was definitely okay, we need to start with the very most basic that anybody who's never seen yarn before could start with, and then gradually increase a new skill on each one of them, or, you know, new stitches and stuff like that. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't introducing too many new things at once to the audience. And I started off with small patterns because when you're first starting off, your tension's going to be all over the place. You don't want to do stuff. So the first several patterns are mostly just cowls and scarves because, you know, then you're not having too many stitches in a row. You're not, you know, if you make a mistake, it's easy to just go back and fix it or say, you know what, it's not a big deal. It's just a scarf, you know, stuff like that. So it starts off very gradually with some cowls and scarves, all that take like 1 or 2 skeins of yarn. And then we start introducing shawls and we go through various techniques with the shawls. And then we start doing stuff like I wanted to make sure that we had some in the round. So the first, there's a hat mitt set and you do the mittens first so you can, you know, get used to the stitch pattern on something flat because they're just worked flat then sewn, and then it goes to the hat. So you already know the stitch pattern, you're already familiar with it, but now you're starting to work in the round, so you're getting a nice easy introduction into the round so that the only new thing you're learning on it is in the round. And then we go to 2 color in the round, which is the capelet I'm wearing. There's also you know, 2 color in the round cowl. So you start learning, you know, more advanced stuff with the in the round work. And then at the end, we start going into advanced Tunisian crochet lace. This shawl here is the final pattern in the book, and it's kind of the culmination of all the things you would have learned if you worked through the patterns in the book. It goes through shaping, it goes through lace work, it goes through color changes, and I want to say by the end of this book, if you've worked through most of the patterns, there is nothing on Ravelry or out there for Tunisian crochet that you couldn't do. So that was my goal.
Tell me a little bit about how you approach yarn choices for this book.
As I approached yarn choices for the book, one of the things I wanted to do was make sure that I was, one, choosing a fair amount of financially accessible yarn. So there's a lot of patterns that use Cascade. This uses Malabrigo, so that if I wanted to show that Tunisian crochet looks good both in more affordable yarns, but also the fancy hand-dyed yarns. For the hand-dyed yarns, I wanted to highlight makers of color because they are traditionally underrepresented. And so almost all of the hand-dyed yarn that's used in the book is made by a maker of color. We have people like Lola Bean Yarn Co., Kim Dyes Yarn, some smaller ones like Camellia Fiber Co. So I wanted to make sure that I was showcasing what I felt was, you know, important values to me, you know, and how good our community is in making sure that I am showing off those people.
Well, I met you at Rhinebeck, and
Yes.
I immediately recognized you, and not only you, but your husband as well, because both of you are prominent features in this
Yes.
in this book. You're modeling all the things yourself, or you have him to model it, right? Why did
He
you?
was a very good sport.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, he seems to enjoy it, and I actually asked him about it, and he was very proud of his role in that book. Why did you decide to model it yourselves?
Money. I cost nothing. Models cost money. You know, creating a craft book, you know, we aren't New York Times bestsellers, so the amount that I will re, you know, make from this is not going to be, it's not going to fund my retirement fund, shall we say. Doing it myself means that it makes it a little more financially affordable for me to do this. I can spend my advance on other things like, too many rounds of tech editing and stuff like that. So, um, I did get my husband to do some of the modeling because I wanted to make sure that guys didn't feel excluded from Tunisian crochet. I know sometimes these things are very, very female centric, and I wanted to make sure that, I was everybody who is interested. I mean, I have male testers, I want to make sure that everybody was represented in this book.
Well, let's talk about the testers. How do you pick the testers? Like, who makes ideal tester for you? What kind of information you seek from testing?
Testing is absolutely essential, in my opinion, for putting out a quality product. I want testers who have at least some familiarity with Tunisian crochet. If I sometimes do get testers who are like, I've never done it before, but your advanced level thingy looks stunning. Can I test it? I'm like, go do some swatching first and then come back. But I like having a wide variety of testers. I have some testers who I have been testing with me since the very, very beginning. And those are nice. They give me one type of feedback. New testers give me a different type of feedback. I want the testers to be able to pick up the pattern and without having to go anywhere, be able to make the pattern. They don't have to go search online and stuff like that. And I'm looking for feedback, mostly on how I explain things, because as an engineer, I have a very specific way of thinking of stuff. And I understand that I can say something that makes complete sense to me, but is ambiguous to somebody else. And I need to root out those ambiguities, so that there's no question on which is the right path to go, when you're making stuff. So ideal testers have a little Tunisian crochet experience. They could be on their third pattern or they could be on their 100th pattern. And I get different feedback from each of those, and that's always fun. Beyond that, all I really need is for you to be able to communicate with me regularly on if you see something wrong. The hardest thing is when we get to an end of a test and I'm looking at the feedback form and somebody said, I had to fiddle with this thing, back on like row 20. And I'm like, wait, what? I could have, I needed to know that before. So, yeah. So just, communication, readily communicating as soon as you find an issue, that's the most important part for a pattern tester for me, so that I can, figure out real time, is it a real problem? Is it something that I need to, like, is it a wording problem? Is it I wrote the pattern wrong? I mean, we all make those mistakes, and we'll like write something down and read past that 6, 7 times and not notice. Like, there was, like, on the book, there was, in addition to the testers, there was, I think, at least 5 or 6 different sets of eyes that looked at every word in the book. And it was like, we were still finding stuff, like, just as it's going to print. Because I'm like, you just read over stuff. So.
I actually had experience like this once where I was testing a pattern and I ran like on the row 6 or something. I ran into the mistake and I sent it to the designer and she said, well, the other tester didn't have that issue. And I was like, well, can we ask her how she did that? And the tester was saying, well, I just improvised. And I was like, well, are we testing or we improvising?
Yeah. Testers who improvise are, that's hard. Yeah.
Right. I know a friend of mine is writing a book at the moment, and she's been writing it for the past year. And the hardest thing for me, being her tester, was to keep it all a secret. Was that difficult for you because you had all these patterns that you couldn't share anywhere?
Oh yeah, and I felt so bad for the testers too. So for doing this book, I'd already been, a designer for many years, so I already had some testers that I knew were reliable, and so I didn't do any open testing calls for this. I sub-selected some testers that I had worked with in the past that I knew, and I felt bad because yeah, they're like, but I want to like share this, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. They were so thrilled like whatever a month or two ago, and I'm like, okay, it's all free. Go ahead, post all you want.
Well, it's
But
not
yeah, it
even
was
about just posting because it also means that you can't wear it anywhere, like in public, basically, because somebody might ask you what it is and you can't tell them.
Oh yeah, these my all the designs have been sitting in a Rubbermaid tote for a year, and I finally like, okay, I gotta take them out and reblock them because they're all creased, and and it's like, oh, but I can take them out, I can show it off, yay. But yeah, yeah, keeping things very secret was rough. One of the hardest things also is like while I'm writing the book, I can't just only write the book because, I still need to be engaging with my audience and coming up with designs that are, readily available indie designs and stuff like that, so that when I emerge from this, den of writing a book for a year, like I still have people who are interested in what I'm doing. So, yeah, not being able to share at all, and then also having to pretend like I'm just like carrying on as usual, even though I'm like so busy. It's so much work.
Tell me about how you like juggling it all because you work full time and then you have to design for your regular audience and then you're writing a book and testing and all that jazz. And then you have some other interests in your life. How do you manage it all?
Um, Careful scheduling is a big part of it. When I got the contract for the book, the first thing I did was basically go write out a very detailed schedule of when I need to make things, and it was all about prioritizing. So the first thing I had to do is come up with the designs. So I wrote the designs, made the designs, got them tech edited and tested, and there's 20 of them, so that's a lot of testing. And that all I had going first because they could be testing while I'm doing the photography, while I'm writing the rest of the book. So but there was a lot of scheduling and careful planning, and the publisher gave me the option of, I think, 9 months or 15 months, and I picked 9 months, and that was a mistake. But it was also, we were still very much in the pandemic, and so I had less outside things that I needed to do outside of work. So I was able to, just spend my weekend, crocheting and writing and stuff like that. And my husband was super supportive. Like, he had done pattern photography for me in the past, but we both worked really hard in upping our game for this book so that because it was like I really wanted it, I'm not expecting to write another book like this, and I wanted it to, be my piece de resistance, right? But he was super supportive, very helpful, just, making sure like if I'm in the middle of doing all these things, he would take care of other things. So, like
Well, I want to
cleaning the
ask
bathrooms and stuff.
I want to ask you about that because you're saying that you're not going to write another book and you sort of like almost shot yourself in the foot by putting all the information people need to know about knitting any doing any Tunisian crochet on Ravelry, right? By putting it all in this book. Do you think there is anything left in the world of Tunisian crochet that you can put in the future books?
Yes, I think there will be stuff. I feel like Tunisian crochet is finally starting to gain some traction, and the more people out there making it, more designers out there, the more new techniques we're going to come up with. So there will be stuff in the future. I don't think this is the end all and be all. Maybe there will be an Exploring Tunisian Crochet too. Not in the near term, but I didn't go into it thinking that I would be making another book. So I just gave it my all.
Well, let's talk about what's happening now, right? So the book is out today. Right.
Sorry. I know it's like 2.5 years in the making, and it's like, I have my book finally.
So what's the plan now? Like, do you have the whole marketing plan of how you're going to be promoting this book and all the book signings and everything?
Well, that's why I'm here. I'm promoting the book. We started marketing a couple months ago. Definitely working towards making sure that we get it into everybody's hands in time for the holidays. Because, yeah, wow, it's a month and a half away until, end of December. So that's the thing they don't tell you about with books is like, once you hand in the manuscript, you're not done. There's so much still left to do in promoting it. So if any of your viewers, like they want their local yarn store to have me come over and sign copies, have them contact me. But there are a few bookstores or local yarn stores that have my book already, and yeah. I don't like thinking about that. There's still so much to
Well,
do.
when you look back at it, right, because it's such an intense project for so many months,
Yeah.
there are like any regrets? Do you feel like it's like one of those things, so I wish I did this one thing differently, or I wish I could change one more thing? Do you have that, or are you happy with how it all turned out?
I think that thinking is very dangerous. Um, as a designer, like just in general, like you put a pattern out and then you're like, oh, but I could have done this or I could have done that, and it's a vicious cycle if you start going down that. So I try not to think like that. Um, and if I want to do something else, well, okay, maybe I can do another book later.
You have a favorite pattern in that book? Is there something that's like really precious to you?
The one I'm wearing is, I don't know if I have a favorite, but this is definitely in like my top three. I just I enjoy Tunisian crochet in the round with 2 colors. I think it's a really fun technique that is not well explored, and I just wanted to, throw everything at this pattern. I'm using the silver color as the forward pass yarn, the berry color as the return pass, and then just showing all the different ways that you can combine the two. And so this one's probably my favorite. My other favorite one is probably this lace shawl. I love creating lace shawls. I know that they're intimidating to a lot of people, so I'm hoping with this book there are 4 lace patterns, a very basic one, maybe an advanced beginner one, an intermediate one, and then this advanced one at the end, so that you can gradually work up your skills and confidence. And because I think Tunisian crochet lace is really fun, and I want more people to enjoy it too. You don't have to knit in order to have something fun like this.
No, it's really beautiful. And I love the book because there is just so much information in it, and it sort of takes you by your hand and drags you through the whole process and it's manageable. And I only done Tunisian crochet once. I did the class with Padma R. So that was my only experience prior to seeing this book. But I found myself sitting with a crochet hook because I have to buy Tunisian crochet hook just to have it and like play more with this book. But like I was sitting and playing with the samples, going page by
Hmm.
page, and it's like really fun because it's sort of like it starts so easy that you feel empowered that yes, you can do it. And before you understand what's happening, you find yourself in the middle of the book somehow. So,
That is that is the most perfect review because I'm like, that's exactly what I was hoping for when I wrote this.
well, let's
Thank
talk
you.
about like briefly about the Tunisian crochet. If I were to go today and buy a Tunisian crochet hook or set or whatever, what would be your recommendation? How do you go about finding a good tools?
I know a lot of people would probably do something like go on Amazon and see a set of 20 or something for like $10. They're plastic, they're big, they're bulky. I would not recommend starting that way. Like you said, you can use a regular crochet hook to start swatching and stuff like that. And one of the most important things with Tunisian crochet is you need to go up at least 2 hook sizes compared to what you would be using for regular crochet. So um, for example, for a DK weight yarn, I typically use a 6.5 millimeter hook, which I think most people are like, wow, that is huge. But because of how the fabric is created, you need a bigger hook. I honestly recommend Chowgu, their hooks for Tunisian crochet for beginners. They're not the cheapest hooks out there, but they're also fairly affordable. You'll be spending probably like $6 or $7 for a hook, or the whole set of them is I think around 100. Um, they actually I have them. They have the nice flexible cables. With Tunisian crochet, I strongly prefer using a hook with cable for the same reason a lot of knitters like circular hook or circular needles. It takes a lot of the weight off the wrist and you're not holding all of the fabric. I know my wrist gets sore if I'm, have a heavy fabric going on. One of the things with the Chagus is they have a nice pointy end to the hook. And that helps you when you're inserting the hook in the different spots while you're doing Tunisian crochet. So that's what I would recommend. Just buy 1 or 2 hooks in the sizes that you like to use. If you like using fingering weight yarn, grab a 5 millimeter hook. If you like DK weight yarn, a 6.5. If you like the heavier stuff, go up to an 8 millimeter. And just play with it. But yeah, hook with cable definitely makes it a lot more enjoyable. And
Yeah, I'm also a Chiago girl for knitting needles, so I see how they wouldn't disappoint in the Tunisian crochet hook industry.
well, and if you have the interchangeables, it's the same cables, so you just need to buy the hooks. You don't need to buy all new cables and stoppers and stuff like that.
Who knew? Like I just learned something. Well, thank you so much, Lori. Thank you for being my guest today. Thank you for sharing your book with us. And I'm going to put all the information about you and this book and how people can find you in the description of this video so you guys can check it out and give Lori a follow, get the book, play with the Tunisian crochet hook, and keep her posted. Let her know how you like it and what you learned from that book.
Please tag me in everything so I can see what you're making.
Well, thank you so
Thank you.
very much for being my guest today. Thank you.